Hi, welcome to Couples Therapy Bites.
I'm Stephen.
I'm Erin.
And welcome to part 2 of our story. Some of you might have seen the first part of what we just did, but Erin and I are in the process of writing a book, and we've decided to just read potential segments and...
Well, the work we
go
do...
ahead. She's going to explain it.
The work we do is helping individuals, couples, families learn to tell
Our vocational work.
Story. Learn to tell their stories. So the book is us showing that.
Kind of demonstrating what that looks like and how to do it. And so we started with what we shared is our miscarriage story, which we've talked about, but Erin read her kind of experience and her thoughts related to that, and then which I've never heard her say the story in that way. This time I'm going to read my portion, and we'll kind of respond and talk about it together.
The assignment, as you know, whatever that was just talk about our first miscarriage.
Right. We're working with someone who's helping us write.
Yes.
The book. So that's
the topic was this, and we thought we would share it with you in this way, where we would just read it. So Stephen hadn't heard mine, I have not heard his, and it was a big thing to do.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to hear yours. This is vulnerable. I'm just going to say it again. I said it yesterday.
Erin's really worried about this being vulnerable. I don't care.
No, he doesn't. I was just
here
going to say.
Here we go. Let's do it.
Yes.
What do you want to know?
I'm not worried about it, but this is big.
For Erin.
For anyone to
just
share
for Erin.
This.
Erin's the only one.
We're still us. Maybe even
All right,
more so.
I'm gonna jump in and read my story. If you notice, in our first part, we had the fire on, and I talked about how hot it would be. And
but I was comforted by it. But this is his story, so he gets to.
I'm not comforted by the fire being on, so I've turned it off. But yeah, this is my story here. I started stuffing oversized feminine pads into our overnight bag like a bank robber shoving cash into a knapsack. These pads were huge and thick, ready to absorb a 64-ounce big gulp, leaving everything else dry as a bone. I made some comment about how I was going to get my money's worth out of this hospital visit, and Erin and I started laughing. It felt like we hadn't laughed in ages. The pads were meant to sop up the blood that was perpetually flowing from Erin's body. The same blood that I had washed off of her legs as it streamed from her bleeding uterus down her body into the shower drain. She wept, barely able to stand, the blood taunting her, telling her her body had failed, that she had failed to carry our son Beau to full term. Now we were gathering our scant things and anticipating walking out of the hospital room that had been the scene of our worst night together as a young married couple. 24 hours before I began stuffing pads into a bag, Erin and I had woken up ready to enjoy my day off. The morning was slow and easy. In part, this was because it was a day off and the morning did not require anything else from us. In another way, this was out of necessity because Erin had been feeling the constant discomfort of morning sickness. Such a funny phrase, morning sickness. Erin's sickness seemed to be a morning, noon, night, and every moment of the day sickness. During the first 12 weeks of pregnancy, Erin was working as a counselor at a school an hour and a half away from our home in Bozeman. She had to wake up at 4:30 a.m. and leave by 5 a.m. to make it to work on time. This alone is an awful schedule for a human to endure, but for a pregnant human that feels constantly tired and nauseous, it's cruel. In an effort to demonstrate some solidarity with Erin, I woke up with her at 4:30 a.m. and tried to soften the brutality of her schedule. Upon rising from bed, we would walk into the bathroom where Erin would lean over the toilet and dry heave for a few minutes as I held her hair back. Then she would drag herself to the shower, exhaustion still clinging to every inch of her body, and try and wash away her nausea and weariness. Tears would mingle with the water, and I would go into the kitchen to prepare her breakfast and lunch. This was a very specialized process. In the morning, water without ice made Erin want to vomit. But ice water in the afternoon would catalyze her insides wanting to escape to the outside world. Preparing the food portion of breakfast and lunch was even more. nuanced. Breakfast entailed ice water only. Lunch had to be something that didn't smell, a non-meat product, and there could not be much of whatever it was I put in the lunch bag. Thus, vegetables and fruit were about all I could compile for a meal, and occasionally cheese was permissible depending on how severe the dry heave session was that morning. Sorry, my battery's dying. As 5 a.m. rolled around, Erin would weakly, exhaustedly, and sadly exit our small apartment with lunch bag in hand and drive away. She showed such toughness every day. I knew that when she returned later that night, her toughness would be running on fumes, but she would have enough left to come into our living room, drop her things, and collapse onto the couch. She would sleep for hours, waking up only to move to the bed a few hours before the misery began again. Eventually, the routine was too much, and a reported problem of asbestos at Erin's school too serious for her to continue working. She slowed her life down, and the every moment of the day sickness began to slow too. It was at this stage, 13 weeks and 5 days into pregnancy, that we woke up from my day off and leisurely went about our morning. We ate breakfast, yes. Erin could eat a little something now, and looked at the Bridger Mountain Range through our patio windows. We spent some reflective moments reading the Bible and praying about whatever occurred to us in the moment. It was a great morning. Adding to the goodness of those early hours was the anticipation for our midwife appointment later in the morning. I was looking forward to seeing Stacy. She had a nice birth center in downtown Bozeman, and I liked the feel of the place. It felt like something exciting was about to happen. In our minds, this matched our sense of excitement as we waited for our first child to be born. We had taken to calling the baby to be Bo. We lived in Bozeman, and Bo seemed a good placeholder for the name. It's frightening how fast things can change, how our leisurely morning can turn into a frantic day, how anticipation and excitement can degrade into gut-dropping fear of what might happen, how the hope of a child to come is annihilated with each stream of blood descending into the bathroom drain. We sat in Stacy's office, and what was supposed to happen didn't. There was no galloping heartbeat from Bo as the Doppler wand touched down on Erin's pregnant belly. As the wand moved through the thick gel on Erin's skin, we heard static. I stood, like a buffoon, with my cell phone video running ready to catch the special moment, and all I saw was Erin's terrified eyes. She knew, right then, what we would soon find out. Bo had died. I held out hope, not because I'm a hopeful kind of person, but because I'm practical. It's not true until there's verifiable evidence, and until then, there's no use losing control. We walked back to the ultrasound room like two persons being led to their final meal. The feeling of Stacy's office that something exciting was just around the corner had been traded for the impending doom that lingers in the corridors of a hospital. We stared at the 60-inch flat screen, and Bo popped up onto the screen. Not a hint of movement, not a single beat of the heart. Death stared at us, large and in our faces. I think they should use smaller screens for this kind of thing. We chose to give birth to death. We had intended on having Bo, and it seemed right to see him and greet him, even if our greeting would be a goodbye. Nothing was as it should be. We were admitted to the labor and delivery unit and ushered into a room set up for life. Here we waited out the night. Misoprostol was placed in Erin's cervix every couple of hours to fool her uterus into contracting. 26 weeks too soon, her body began the process of birth, and we laid in the hospital bed as the night hours droned on and death neared. The morning came, and so did Bo. We labored, we held his little body, we wept, we prayed, we sang, and we said goodbye. It was horrific and holy. Despite the vast number of feminine pads I had stuffed in our bag, we left the hospital empty. We were empty-handed, and our souls felt hollowed out and vacuous as an abyss. Dazed by agony, we went home and floated around like ghosts. What do you do when your heart is crushed? Erin and I wept, and we chose to avoid hiding from our loss and pain. One of the ways we did this was returning to Erin's hometown of St. Louis and observing the Jewish grief ritual of sitting Shiva. Although we're not Jewish, we were aware that in the Jewish tradition, when one is mourning, they observe Shiva. This means that they remain in their home for a period of time, and others in the community come to them and offer care and support. We decided that we would remain at Erin's childhood home for a week and simply receive those who wished to come and speak with us and hear about Bo. This was a sacred time. In this week of dedicated and purposeful mourning, Erin and I felt that we were one in our grief. When we returned to Bozeman, our grief began to tug us down separate paths, and our togetherness felt like it was fraying at the edges. Erin lingered in her sadness. She sat, staring blankly, weeping often, touching the few clothes and baby blankets her mom bought to celebrate Bo's coming. She let her pain wash over her and drown her. I retreated within, and the grief buzzed and bounced around my insides like a pinball. I felt an intense wave of anxiety churning in my gut, and the task of dealing with work and my grief overloaded my internal systems and made me shut down. I found myself wanting Erin to stop being so engrossed in her grief because it felt like too much. Erin wanted me to stop running from my grief and to walk with her in the grief. We both wanted something from the other that we could not give. We both were grieving, but it looked so different, so other, and we judged one another for the lack of sameness. These were dark days. Days of loneliness, not knowing how to find our way to one another and not knowing how to find our way to ourselves. We had moments of connection, a hug, a glance, a night when our tears both came at the same time. Yet these moments were hard to come by, and the moments of absence from one another felt so loud and heavy. This persisted for months, and then the fog cleared and a path began to materialize that led us back to one another. The rediscovery happened in Hal's office. Hal had a funny way of carrying himself. He was a bit frumpy and disheveled. He dressed in khakis and a collared shirt that were 2 sizes too big and seemed to struggle to understand the concept of being straight. Everything was just a little sideways, and he looked more like a seasoned junior high science teacher than a psychologist. His office was bare and would have felt comfortable in the 70s. Despite these stylistic shortcomings, Hal possessed the acumen of a master in the psychological realm. His frumpiness declared his sincerity, and his disheveled nature spoke of his lack of pretense. He sat with us with all the tenderness of a father listening to his children, without agenda or something to say when we got finished. His questions reflected curiosity and wisdom that comes with living life, both the hard and easy parts. As Erin and I wended through our stories of difference and disconnect, Hal said a simple thing: so what? The specific context was Erin described how she liked to look at the pictures we had of Bo and hold his clothes. I expressed how I didn't feel the need to do these things and didn't like Erin doing them just as she didn't like me not doing them. Hal simply said, so what? Erin, if you want to look at pictures and cry over baby clothes, then go in another room and do it. Stephen, if you don't want to do these things, then don't. And Erin, let him not do them. You don't have to be the same in your grief. So what? You don't have to be the same in your grief. This was the fog-clearing truth and the bricklaying reality that built the path back to one another. In a strange way, our otherness in grief was what brought us to a place of sameness. Our mutual feelings of disconnection became the place where we could connect and feel close. We both knew what it felt like to be alone in our grief and to want the other to come close. We both knew what it felt like to not be able to find one another in the pain and to desperately want the isolation to dissipate. We could not understand all the nuances of one another's grief, but we could understand the nuance of being alone in grief and wanting more. When we started here with each other, we discovered one another, and our loneliness shifted into togetherness. This is what sustained my relationship with Erin. In so many ways, this is what sustains my relationship with Erin today. In our moments of disconnection, we can remember, so what? And connect in the disconnect. Our grief and ache for Bo still lingers, but it does not keep us from one another any longer. We remember him. We remember our struggle to see one another, and we still laugh about that bag full of feminine pads. The end.
Sounds like you.
Yeah. Why?
Oh, well, thank you for sharing. It's powerful. It's powerful. You have a way of writing that speaks to me. you can tell a horrible story and I can feel really sad and laugh and think it's a beautiful story. And I have lots of comments.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like what?
Well, I think it's funny. I think that we had a lot of the same sort of themes and even words, and yours is much more like mine than I thought, although it's written totally like you and not like me. But
no, I that's what I thought. I was like, oh, we like hit on some of the
same things.
Yeah,
for sure.
Just very differently.
Yeah. But I liked it. I'm thankful for it rather than I liked, sort of like, it seems silly to say. It's good to remember how different we experienced the same 48 hours,
Yeah.
or I guess whatever. We've experienced a lot of the same time,
Yeah.
but we were literally together except for your grocery store run.
And my block of cheese that I brought back, yeah.
But it's real different, and it's really beautiful. And
how so? Like, because you said you have a lot of comments.
More about that. Well, I'm trying to say the affirming things first.
I don't care about the affirming thing. I'm just curious what you're.
Well, so but you were you had me, and I was like, oh, that's right, and it's beautiful, and that's right, and then you brought up Hal, and I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot. Man, it was good. But then you said that Hal said in Aaron, if he doesn't want to do it, he doesn't have to.
Right.
But that's not what happened.
It wasn't? Did he tell me that?
Yes.
Oh, that's right, because he said, Stephen, if Erin wants to do that.
You said she needs to stop. She's wallowing.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Revisionist history thing.
Yeah,
But I think... But it's so interesting because I don't, in writing that, I wasn't writing it as a...
Put down.
Erin didn't get it. It was more like...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think it's
It's so true. He did say it to me.
He did. He wanted me to stop, and I didn't
Let the record be set straight.
Vindicated.
Hal said that.
Which isn't the point. The point being simply...
how we remember things.
Yes. And that it was true both ways.
Yeah.
That wasn't the point. But man, our takeaways and the importance of them and how it does impact how we see the other. And
yeah, because that might not have been a shifting point for you. It was for me. I felt like after that, because we were going to therapy because we were we're not doing so great. But I just remember that being helpful for me, I think.
It was helpful. Well, Hal was helpful, but I have a different moment. The moment that sticks with me.
Yeah. The one about the kill, where you felt
no,
not that moment.
There's lots of moments, good moments. It was really powerful. Therapy after a loss can be, hopefully usually is, good and important and healing and raw and hard to do. And you are experiencing so much difference. And but I remember for me, I think the hospital for us was such a different experience than a lot of people's miscarriage stories that we've heard. They affirmed us.
Yeah, it was a good experience. It really was.
No moments of...
Bozeman Deaconess Hospital.
Yeah.
Really great.
Our doctor, I wasn't as big a fan of, but she was barely there. Regardless, they took his prints. They didn't make us feel crazy for delivering a baby at 14 weeks. There was not a moment.
Yeah.
So I felt like we walked out feeling well, yeah, of course this would be our experience. And then we walked out into a world that was you miscarried at 14 weeks. You're going to have more babies. You'd be surprised to know I'm not crying because I may never get pregnant again. I'm crying because I just held my baby and I had to leave him there. It was hard. It became really unsettling, unnerving, and I did lose my nerve. Maybe I am crazy. And how the moment for me was, tell me more about this. We're explaining it all to him, and he sort of the same thing. Well, of course you'd feel like that. You had a mother like you had. We explained the attachment and the connection we have with my mom, and then he said, and you are that mother. Like,
Yeah.
so of
You were
course
attaching and connecting.
yeah,
to the-
you would,
yeah.
you were that attached to your baby. And I felt both like, oh my gosh, like no wonder it hurts to lose something like that so much. And also like, I am that mother.
Yeah.
I love my baby. I'm not crazy for feeling so sad.
Yeah.
That was my hell moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I liked, it's a beautiful story. I thought it was interesting. It both began and ended with the stuffing of
feminine
the
pads.
pads. It was.
I think that might be one of the top 5 funniest moments in our marriage.
when you were stuffing.
Yeah.
The other thing was,
I mean, it was like
we were
so amazing.
Who's
We've been
good?
married 11 years. That's one of the top 5. And that's pretty good.
we needed the levity. But the other part that made it hilarious is he's like trying to do it like we're stealing from the hospital.
But we just ended up paying for him anyway.
Well, she comes in, then one of the nurses comes in and hands us this giant bag, and he's like, so I can probably unload my pockets.
But we had thick feminine pads
For
in our,
ages.
that we moved, they stuck with us for some years afterwards. 'Cause,
Yes, because why not?
hey, you never know.
But I liked too the way you talked about us. I feel like you did a different job, maybe not better. I almost said better.
It's not better, yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, because it was really hard. I think I sort of skipped, like, yes, it was hard, but that's what brought us here, and I think you gave a lot more meat to that.
That it was hard.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And how, it's like not
Yeah.
such a skipping.
Yeah.
But how specifically it was hard and how that hard became holy, honestly,
Yeah.
for us. Yeah, it's good. It was well written too. I like the way you write our
Thanks.
stories.
Thanks.
Your story of our story.
Well, thanks for letting us share some of our story. We're going to be doing this periodically as we continue to write and sharing these things in this medium. So I would love to hear from you. Would love to hear if it feels useful, helpful, how you tell stories with your partner. But yeah, thanks for letting us have this time.
Yeah, thank you.
See you next time.